Greetings viewers, this is CP666 signing on for another video of some Hamfest gear from Hamfest 23. Although this wasn't actually from the Hamfest itself, it came courtesy of Weasel2HTM at our little swap fest beforehand. The fact that it's got an HP logo on it is probably raising some questions for some people because they know that I am not the world's biggest fan of HP anything. And that's certainly true. But these are what you would consider to be the complement, or you could consider to be a complement, to the Lenovo ThinkPad. And that's basically effectively what they are, is they're HP's business-grade laptop. Which I suppose makes them a cut above such crappy things as, I don't know, Dell XPS's that were also received at the Hamfest. Now you'll notice very carefully that I have two of these. I only spoke for one. Now, what ended up happening, to my recollection anyway, is that an extra one ended up in the SDP Northeastern Tour bus, i.e., if you like good ideas, Mercury Grand Marquis. I had a bad habit of opening my big fat mouth and ending up with random treasures that I don't, necessarily need. For example, that stereo right there, that tape deck, which I don't know how it ended up sideways like this. That's kind of odd. I have to fix that, but sorry for the fan noise. That Akai tape deck from Hamfest 22. So what I did is I just kind of grabbed it. Of course, that came with it with the side effect that there was an HP stream sitting on top of it, and at the time, nobody could figure out whose it was, but it was later revealed that was supposed to be If You Like Good Ideas HP Stream. And now it's sitting in my garage. Oops. But either way, I don't know what I'm going to do with three of them. Because I have one from last year, and I spoke for one this year because I wanted to put Linux on it. Now I have three. What am I going to do with the third one? It's a very good question, but it's not even the point of this video, so I certainly digress on that. So as far as these things are concerned, they are both exactly the same. They are HP DeleteBook laptops, or as they're actually known. Yes, I know it's out of focus, but they are EliteBook 8460Ws. And as mentioned, these are basically functionally equivalent to the Lenovo ThinkPad, and in particular, they would be equivalent to the ThinkPad T420, being as though they're 14-inch laptops with Sandy Bridge CPUs. In particular, both of these have got i5 2520Ms. I believe they're both exactly the same. I know that at least one of them, and again, like I said, I'm going to assume that they're both exactly the same. 4 GB of memory with one module. Can take two, and I do plan on upgrading that in this video. 320 GB mechanical hard drive, again, I plan on upgrading that in this video. And they've been wiped, so they're not running any operating system right now. They're not maybe quite as nice as the ThinkPad, in that they don't have what's called the Ultra Bay. What they do have is a DVD dual-layer drive burner. Up there would probably, my guess anyway, would be that this is an express card slot. And I would be correct. You can see there it's got the little notch in it for the express card. Spring-loaded, pretty nice. SD card reader there. It will just do SD cards and also multimedia cards, which is the predecessor to SD. It will not do things like memory sticks, smart media cards, etc., etc. 2 USB 3.0, although one of them is very clearly broken, so I might have to do something about that. Maybe I'll put some tape over it or something to prevent myself from using it by accident. Firewire, DC in. On the back, there's the battery right there. There is the Ethernet VGA with no screws on it, which is fine. There's a modem. I'm kind of surprised to see a modem on something like this. Definitely 56K by the time this would have been made. There's a Kensington lock there. This hasn't totally latched. I wonder if the latches on this are a little messed up. There's a cooling vent. Somewhat of an oddity. That is actually a DisplayPort connector. There's a USB 2.0 port there that with a lightning bolt beside it, which suggests to me that that is actually a charge port. So if you plug something into that while the laptop's turned off, it will actually charge it. This beside it is a combination eSATA and USB 2.0. There's a microphone and a headphone. This, I believe, would have been used for like a smart, they're called smart cards, for things like authentication, because again, this would have been a business-grade laptop. Your indicators are on the front. You really can't see them. I don't know why HP chose to make them like that, but they did. And when we open it up, I mean, you can see that they definitely need TLC. I think both of them are in roughly the same condition. Again, a little bit of TLC required on the screen, but not too bad. Unfortunately, this keyboard is absolute garbage compared to what the ThinkPad at the time would have had. But, I mean, I guess it's not completely offensive. This is basically just like your average MacBook keyboard of the time period. Maybe a little bit cheaper feeling, but not too much. Core i5, Windows 7, there's a license key that's underneath the battery. I believe, yeah, this actually does have the fingerprint reader there. A couple of hotkey controls. There's a dent over here in this one, which is pretty funny. It has a webcam, and it also has a light. You can see right there, that's actually a keyboard light. Again, pretty similar to the ThinkPad. Compared to the ThinkPad, these are actually fairly nice to service. Now, the cynic in me believes that it's because of the HP logo, and HP realized that, hey, you know, they are at least a little bit self-conscious of the fact that their laptops are crap, and, well, you'll probably need to service this quite often. Okay, I kid, mostly. But the way that this works is quite simple. Is that latch right here simply presses and allows you to take the entire back off the machine, which is what I've done now, and gives you access to, well, basically everything. There's your wireless card there. I believe these are whitelisted, which is a little irritating, but, you know, not a surprise. They're always like that. On top of that could actually go a full-size, I suppose you could probably use a full-size wireless card on the top there, because they're both mini PCI Express. I don't think there's any real difference in the two. But what it's really designed for is you put your wireless in the bottom, and then you have cellular connection, because this would actually support that in the top. Potentially. I actually didn't see a spot for a SIM card. It's not really something that I've ever seen used on a laptop, and not necessarily something I care about either anyway. Oh, it actually turned on there for a second. That was interesting. When I put the battery back in. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised by that. I just hope that it doesn't decide it's gonna... Is it on? It is on. Oh, neat. So I'm gonna turn that off now. Anyway, once again, pretty easy to service here. There's your CPU right there. Now, I'm not 100% sure how you get this heatsink out. I think there's a couple screws there. You gotta take out the screws here, and then these 4 screws there. And you could pull this entire assembly out. It is socketed. Again, that is a Sandy bridge. I forget exactly what socket that would be for the laptop, but you could put anything in there that you really wanted. That would be the modem right there at the front. I'm curious why it's at the front and not at the back, which is where the connection actually happens to be, but I guess it's taken up by this heatsink assembly. Optical drive is here. I believe there's one screw that you would use to take that out, and then you could just pull it out. There's one speaker right there. Here's your RAM slots here. And as mentioned, I believe that this has... If I can get it out here. 4 gigs of RAM. Yeah, 4 gigabyte PC3 12800. I don't know exactly what speed that is. I want to say that it's 1333, maybe even 1600. That it might actually be 1600, because I think 10600 would be 1333, but not 100%. I have this. Timatek premium memory. But it's actually SK Hynix memory. And that might actually be what's in here. But this is an 8GB kit of DDR3 12800. Unfortunately, it's PC3L, so I don't know if it's 100% compatible with this system, but I'm going to try it, and if it blows up, then hey, it'll make the video go viral now, won't it? Alright, there, if it works, is a quick and dirty memory upgrade. The hard drive is underneath here, and again, you just pull that off. There's a couple of screws here that you pull out, 3 of them, and then that entire assembly will pull out. There's 3 screws. I believe they're actually captive, but they might not be. I do know they're spring-loaded, which is pretty neat. And there is, of course, the 320GB hard drive that this would have presumably shipped with. Does it have an HP sticker on it? Like an HP part number or something? HPN. So, yeah, probably. Doesn't say HP spares on it or anything like that, but again, I'm pretty sure it's probably an original drive. I've got this Samsung 860 EVO just kind of floating in there at random for right now, because I'm not 100% sure if that drive is actually any good. It came from work. There was some suspicion as to whether or not it was actually any good, so I'll test it, and if it is good, then I can go ahead and throw it into this caddy. I mean, you've seen hard drives get put into caddies a million times. You don't really need to see that on video. If it doesn't work, I'll find a different drive, basically. So I'm going to put the lower cover on this, power it up, make sure that my memory works, and then I'll do some testing, probably on this SSD. We'll install Windows with any luck, and we'll see where we go from there. Okay, got it plugged in now, charging the battery. Let's see what happens. Ha! Escape for startup menu. Taking a little bit of time for the startup menu. There we go. Alright. I want to go into BIOS setup, so we'll press F10. Uh-oh. Enter a password. Well, that's a bit of a problem. Well, unfortunately, that one's going to be down and out. At least until I either get the password for it or figure out how to erase it. Which, and there's probably an easy way to do it, but you never know with some of these business-grade laptops. You might be setting yourself up for a world of hurt if you happen to forget what that password is, because sometimes it's stored in non-volatile memory, and you got to engage in shenanigans in order to erase it. Remember the old Toshiba satellites with the gray case? Yeah, those are fun when that happens. Anyway, this one, the second one of the two, actually does not have such a password on it, or at least it didn't seem to. And I mean, who knows? I know that the display on that started acting a little weird, so maybe there's something wrong with the RAM that's causing problems. But either way, here's this one. I know it's a little out of focus. There's not much I can do with this camera. BIOS version F27 from 2012, probably the most recent. This does have the ATI video, which I'm surprised still works. i5 2520M at 2.5 GHz. It's still got the stock 4 GB of memory, Hynix Hyundai. Hyundai actually did have, and that is the automaker, they did have quite the presence in the PC world back in the early days of computing, when practically everybody had a presence in the computer world. It does have a battery in it, so it sees it. It's probably charging it. In fact, the battery might actually be fully charged. At least the BIOS suggested that it was. Set the date and time. The battery is dead, so probably have to do that at some point. Security, you know, usual stuff. Doesn't really matter. None of that matters. Needs a system language. Some boot options. UEFI mode. Now, I remember that this said something. It doesn't say anything on it. But it would support UEFI. But I'm not going to turn that on this one because I'm probably going to put Windows 7 on this one. And then the other one will get Linux whenever it is that I actually figure out what to do with it. Somebody's probably going to say, Windows 7's out of support. You should put Windows 10 on that thing. Windows 10's garbage. I'm sorry. There's no way around it. It's terrible. They've never managed to actually make it work right for anything. And I'm not going to run a buggy operating system on my computer when it's licensed for Windows 7. And it'll run just fine. If I really want a Windows 10 machine, it's not like I don't have 1,000 of them already. Or can, find one, pull it off the shelf, and make it a Windows 10 machine, I just want my computer to work, I think for the most part, that's all okay. Device configuration, it's in HCI mode. So I'll set this up to my liking. And then I'm going to actually go ahead and change the hard drive with the SSD, because I do have more of those SSDs. In fact, I actually have an extra one. Now why did that do that? No, I don't want you to do that. I have an extra one here that came out of a system that I pilfered from work that actually doesn't work. I thought that system had a 240 in it, one of those, a 250, one of those SanDisk X110 drives, and those are pretty decent, but not quite as decent as a Samsung 850 Pro, which is what this is, or maybe it's an 850 Evo, I don't 100% know. I don't even know what the difference would happen to be, but I'll take that off of that adapter bracket and put that in this machine, and then we'll set to installing Windows. Okay, upgraded the RAM to 8 gigs. And I'm kind of curious if this thing will actually see that SSD. Like I said, that's that 860. Is it 860 Pro or 860 Evo? I already forget. The fact it's sitting around at that for so long kind of makes me wonder. So let's see. System information. Yep, 8 gigs. Doesn't say anything about what drive is installed on that. Aha! Hard disk test failed. Disk not installed. So that SSD is no good. So let me go get that 850, and we'll install that actually in the drive cage here, which I'm interested to note is actually a Seagate drive on this one, or the other one was a Hitachi, which is what I would expect from OEM. But I'm not so sure that this also is an OEM, because data manufacture is 08 of 2012, which would probably have been around the data manufacture of the actual system itself. Well, it managed to boot something on that, whatever was left on that SSD. Unfortunately, it's Windows 10 Enterprise, and I'm not running that on this because, well, obvious reasons. First of all, I'm not really interested in abusing a KMS server. Second of all, I'm certainly not putting the VPN on this in order to abuse said KMS server. And I think that Windows 10 is hot garbage. There's your hot take for the day. I'm sure I'll get flamed in the comments for daring to say something about it on video. But let's not kid ourselves, folks. Windows 7, even now that it's been out of support for, well, fast approaching 4 years, it's still infinitely more reliable. It doesn't reboot itself in the middle of the night, or blue screen when you're in the middle of work in order to install updates. Which, yes, Windows 10 does, no matter how much Microsoft wants to say or provide evidence to the contrary. It's pretty obvious when there's no reason at all for a blue screen to happen, that it happens and the computer immediately reboots and is like, oh, installing updates. Yeah. That's what the blue screen was for. It was so it could install updates. Anyway, I'm going to let this thing hopefully boot into a boot menu, boot over the network, and we're going to try something that I haven't actually tried on physical hardware before. Okay. Install Windows. We're going to do this over PXE. If we can. Now, I've never actually tried this on physical hardware. Like I said, I've done this in a VM before, and it worked fine in a VM. But I've never done it on physical hardware. There's a number of different ways that this can go wrong, not the least of which is if the Windows PE environment that I've got set up here doesn't actually happen to support the network card that's in here. this isn't going to work. But I figure this is easier than finding my ISO, burning a disk, and then doing it that way. And making sure that, hey, I delete the ei.cfg file and I'm able to install the correct version according to the license key that is on the bottom of the computer. So, we'll let this do its thing. And I will come back. I'm also going to grab the license from the underside of the computer, if this works. Well, unfortunately that was a fail. It didn't see the network hardware on this machine, so I booted it up with a CD now. I guess we'll just run through this. I don't know if it'll ask me for the product key. I don't remember when Windows 7 asks you for that. I know later versions of Windows ask you for that right away, but I think Windows 7 will wait. I believe this is the x64 version of this. I delete all this junk that's on this drive because I don't need any of it. And we'll install to the free space. And we'll let that go and do its thing. Okay, Windows 7 is installed, and it's even activated already, which is cool. Although I had to do that myself. It's not like pre-activation or anything like that. But there are no drivers installed, including the Intel Ethernet. Apparently that's also not working. So that would explain why the network did not work on the Windows PE environment, because it's based on Windows 7. So apparently the 82579LM does not have a driver by default. Now I'm going to have to move the Ethernet driver so I can connect to my network share, load all the other drivers, so this could take a while. Alright, we are now at the point where I have everything installed. And I do mean everything. There are no unknown devices here. Windows is activated. So we'll go ahead and we will run the Windows Experience Index rating on this computer and see what it scores. Okay, like I said, out of focus, so it's going to be hard to read. But it gets a 7.1 for the processor, 7.5 for the RAM, which is pretty good. 5.3 and 6.3 for graphics, gaming graphics, respectively, and the hard drive, being an SSD, unsurprisingly, is maxed out at a 7.9. So, I guess all in all, the only thing I really have a problem with is probably the ambient light sensor on this. I might see if I can turn that off. And then the other one, I think I'm going to revisit that in another video because I just kind of want to get this thing wrapped up at this point. Being as though the time on the camera is completely wrong. I don't know why the time says that, but it's actually 25 minutes past midnight on a work night for me, so like I said, I want to get this wrapped up, so we're going to do just that. I'll probably install some programs on this later, you know, like my core temp program and hard disk monitoring and other things, proper web browser, etc., etc. But I think for now, I'm just going to go ahead and shut the video down. So, thank you for watching. And if you have any comments, feel free to leave them below.